When the children of two rival millionaires meet by chance, desire ignites. But can love survive a war built on hatred? It began with a glance, fleeting, fragile, yet powerful enough to change the course of two lives. The ballroom was alive with music and laughter, but to Isabella, the world grew still when her eyes found his. Across the polished marble floor, where chandeliers spilled golden light like liquid fire, stood a stranger whose presence silenced everything else. He was tall, his posture effortless yet commanding, and though 100 faces surrounded him, Alexander's eyes seemed to search for hers alone. It lasted no more than a heartbeat, that first connection, but in that instant she felt something forbidden spark to life, an aching pull she could not explain. They should have looked away. They should have ignored the quickening of their pulses, the invisible thread tugging them closer. But when the orchestra swelled and couples began to take the floor, destiny refused to be denied. He crossed the distance with a quiet confidence, his every step echoing like fate itself. And when he reached her, his voice was calm but charged with something deeper. "Would you do me the honor of this dance?" Her lips parted, the word "yes" slipping out before reason could catch it. In a swirl of silk and music, their hands found each other, warm and trembling with the weight of something both terrifying and exhilarating. Neither spoke much as they danced, but every brush of his hand against hers, every glance that lingered longer than it should, told a story words could not capture. It was as though they had known each other in another life, and fate had conspired to reunite them here, under the glow of chandeliers. But as quickly as it began, the moment was stolen away. A whisper from their family, a stern look from hers, and just like that, Isabella and Alexander were separated, torn back into the currents of expectation. They did not speak again that night. And yet when they returned home to opposite sides of the city, sleep refused to come. Both lay awake, haunted by the memory of that single dance, that single connection, burning with a desire neither could extinguish. Only later would the cruel truth unfold, that he was a Davenport and she a Monterey, that their names had been enemies long before they were born. But on that night, in that moment, they were simply two souls who had found each other in a crowded room. And they both knew they would do anything to feel it again. The days that followed felt unbearably empty. For Isabella, the walls of the Monterey estate had never seemed so suffocating. Surrounded by polished marble floors and glittering chandeliers, she should have felt like royalty, yet all she felt was restless. She drifted through dinners and boardroom conversations with her father, nodding when spoken to, but her mind was elsewhere, back in that ballroom, where a stranger's hand had held hers, where her heart had learned a rhythm it could not forget. Every night, as the city lights shimmered beyond her window, she replayed the memory of that dance, the warmth of his palm against hers, the way his eyes softened as if he had looked past her family name and seen her soul. She told herself it was foolish, that such a moment should have been left behind, but her heart refused to obey. Across the river, Alexander lived the same torment. The Davenport mansion buzzed with talk of profits, mergers, and power plays, yet none of it mattered. His father spoke of expanding their empire. His mother reminded him of the legacy he was destined to inherit. But Alexander's thoughts lingered on a woman he was forbidden to want. He could still hear the rustle of her dress, still see the fire in her gaze. It was madness. A Monterey is the enemy. Every instinct drilled into him since childhood should have warned him away. And yet, when he closed his eyes, she was there, her smile, her laugh, the ghost of her presence burning in his veins.
Fate, however, is rarely satisfied with a single meeting. One late afternoon, days after the gala, Isabella found herself at the city's Grand Art Gallery, a place she often escaped to when the weight of her family's expectations pressed too heavily upon her. She moved slowly through the quiet halls, her gaze lingering on paintings of faraway places, scenes of freedom she longed for but had never known. And then she felt it, that same pull, that same tightening in her chest. Turning, her breath caught. There he was, Alexander, standing beneath a vast painting of a storm-tossed sea, his profile etched against the canvas as though the artist himself had conjured him into being. For a moment, neither moved. The world seemed to hold its breath, and in the silence, their eyes locked once again. "Isabella," he said softly, as if testing the sound of her name. Her lips curved into a trembling smile. "Alexander." The air between them crackled, charged with something both dangerous and irresistible. They should have walked away, should have remembered the bloodline feud that chained their lives. Instead, they stepped closer. They wandered the gallery together, their conversation hushed but alive. For the first time, Isabella laughed freely, unburdened by her surname. Alexander listened, captivated, as she spoke of her love for art, for music, for all the little dreams she kept hidden from her family's iron grip. In turn, he confessed that he longed for a life not measured in profit and power, but in meaning. Every word pulled them deeper. Every glance wove a thread stronger than the walls built by their family's hatred. By the time the gallery closed and the night pressed in around them, they both knew the truth. This was no passing fancy. It was a fire, and it would not be easily extinguished. When they parted, it was with reluctant steps, as though gravity itself fought to keep them together. But even as the distance stretched between them, both carried the same thought, the same ache, the same desperate wish. When can I see you again?
The spark between them was undeniable, but sparks, when exposed, risk being stamped out. For Isabella, the return to her family's mansion after her secret meeting with Alexander felt heavier than ever. Her father, Richard Monterey, sat at the long mahogany dining table, his voice sharp as steel as he discussed construction bids and international contracts. He barely looked at her, except when he spoke of duty. "You'll be meeting Charles Whitmore this week," he said, not bothering to soften his tone. "His family controls shipping lines, a potential ally. You'll be kind, Isabella, and make a good impression." She pressed her lips together, hiding her resistance. To her father, alliances were built with handshakes and marriages, his daughter just another piece in his empire. She wanted to scream that she was more than that, but instead she lowered her gaze, swallowing the words that burned her tongue. Meanwhile, across the river, Alexander faced his own chains. At the Davenport estate, his father, Jonathan Davenport, paced the study, his voice rich with ambition. "The Montereys are circling a new contract in Dubai. We can't let them take it. I need you sharp, son, ruthless." Alexander nodded, though his mind was elsewhere. Every mention of the Montereys twisted like a knife. He couldn't reveal what had happened, that he had met Isabella, that he had spoken to her, laughed with her, felt something he had never felt before. His father would see it as betrayal. His mother would see it as weakness. And yet, despite the weight of bloodlines, despite the walls their families had built, he couldn't stay away. Days later, in the hush of midnight, Isabella slipped onto the balcony outside her room,
The city lights glimmered below, and the cool breeze carried with it the whisper of freedom. In her hand was a small note, a secret message passed at the gallery's exit, written in Alexander's bold handwriting. "Meet me, midnight, the old Riverside Cafe." Her heart pounded. She knew the risks. If her family discovered it, if anyone caught them, the consequences would be brutal. But the thought of not going, of letting the fire between them fade, was unthinkable. And so, cloaked in shadows, Isabella left the mansion, her footsteps quiet against the stone path. When she arrived at the cafe, its windows dark and its chairs stacked for the night, Alexander was already waiting. His figure leaned against the rail by the river, the moonlight painting him in silver. When he saw her, his expression softened, relief flooding his features. "You came," he whispered. "Of course I did," she answered, her voice trembling, not with fear, but with something deeper. "I couldn't stay away." In that moment, the rivalry, the legacies, the weight of their families, all of it melted into the night. He reached for her hand, and she didn't resist. For the first time, neither cared who they were supposed to be. They were just two souls, bound by something stronger than bloodlines. But as the river flowed silently beside them, neither knew that shadows were watching, and that the fragile secret they shared was already at risk of discovery.
The river became their witness, the night their shield. From that first midnight meeting, Isabella and Alexander wove a world of their own, a fragile, hidden world carved out of stolen hours and whispered promises. They knew the danger, but the risk only made their moments together burn brighter. Their meetings became a rhythm, some nights at the deserted Riverside Cafe, where the moon painted silver paths on the water. Other nights in the quiet corners of the city's art gallery, long after the patrons had left, where Isabella's laughter echoed softly between the marble walls. Once, Alexander even found his way to her family's estate garden under the cover of darkness, where the roses stood as silent witnesses to their defiance. Each encounter was a rebellion against their names. In those stolen hours, Alexander shed the weight of being a Davenport heir. With Isabella, he was not a strategist or a weapon in his father's war. He was simply a man, raw and alive. He told her of his dreams, to travel, to paint, to find meaning beyond the golden cages of wealth. And Isabella, who had lived her whole life under her father's commands, opened like a flower beneath the sun. She confessed how she longed for music and art, for a life where love was not a transaction, but a truth. In Alexander's gaze, she found the freedom she had craved, the freedom to simply be. They laughed like children who had discovered a secret playground. They whispered like lovers who had known each other for lifetimes. And when words failed, silence spoke for them. The warmth of a hand held too long, the brush of fingers against skin, the closeness that left their hearts racing. One night, beneath a canopy of stars, their closeness broke the last barrier. Isabella's voice trembled as she whispered, "Alexander, this is madness. If our family's ever discovered—" He silenced her with a gentle touch, his hand cradling her cheek. His eyes burned with the fire of a man who had already made his choice. He said, "Let them discover. Let the world crumble if it must. I would rather have one night with you than a lifetime without it." Her breath caught, tears glimmering in her eyes, and then, unable to fight it any longer, she leaned into him. Their kisses met in a kiss that was not just a kiss, but a vow a vow to hold on to each other no matter how the world raged around them. In that moment, nothing else existed. Not the Monterey Empire, not the Davenport dynasty, not the decades of hatred that had carved a canyon between their families. There was only love, pure, defiant, unstoppable. But even as they clung to each other beneath the stars, the world beyond their secret sanctuary moved on. Rival empires plotted in boardrooms. Whispers of betrayal stirred in shadowed halls, and somewhere in the distance, footsteps of fate began to draw closer. For though their love blossomed in secret, secrets have a way of being revealed.
For weeks, Isabella and Alexander lived as though time belonged to them alone. Stolen nights, whispered dreams, and kisses that tasted like promises. Each moment weaving their hearts tighter together. But love, no matter how carefully hidden, cannot stay hidden forever. It was Isabella's brother, Marcus Monterey, who first began to suspect. He noticed her slipping away from the estate at strange hours, the glow in her eyes when she returned, the softness in her voice when she thought no one was listening. At first, he said nothing, until the night he followed her. That night, under the silver gaze of the moon, Marcus saw the unthinkable, his sister in the arms of a Davenport. His blood boiled with rage, not just at Alexander, but at the betrayal of it all. To him, it was not love, it was treachery. The Montereys and the Davenports were enemies, and Isabella was the daughter of his father's empire. To be seen with him was to stain the family name. The next morning, the storm broke. Isabella was summoned to her father's office, where Richard Monterey's voice thundered like a judge delivering a sentence. "You dare shame this family?" he roared, slamming his hand against the desk. "With him, a Davenport? Have you lost your mind, Isabella?" Her heart pounded, but she stood tall, refusing to bow to the fire in his eyes. "I love him," she said softly but firmly, "and nothing you say can change that." The room went silent. Richard's face hardened, his eyes turning to ice. "Love," he spat. "Love is weakness, and weakness has no place in this family. From this moment on, you will not see him again. If you disobey me, you are no daughter of mine." Tears burned her eyes, but she did not break. She turned and fled, her heart shattering, her father's ultimatum echoing in her ears. Across the river, Alexander faced his own storm. Jonathan Davenport had learned of the affair from Marcus's whispered message, delivered with the venom of a brother scorned. Jonathan's fury was cold, precise, the fury of a man who saw betrayal as war. "You've disgraced us," he said to his son, his tone sharp as a blade. "You've let a Monterey crawl into your heart. Do you not understand what's at stake? They are the enemy. And now, because of your foolishness, the board is questioning your loyalty." Alexander clenched his fists, fire burning in his chest. "Loyalty," he shot back. "You speak of loyalty to a legacy built on hate, but I will not deny my heart. I love her father, and no empire, no war, no blood feud will change that." Jonathan's eyes narrowed. "Then you are no son of mine." The words cut deeper than any blade, but Alexander stood his ground. For the first time he realized the truth. To be loyal to his family was to betray himself. That night, Isabella and Alexander met again, their faces pale with anguish, their hands trembling as they clung to one another by the river's edge. "They know," Isabella whispered, tears streaking her cheeks. "My father forbids it. He swore I'd be cast out if I ever saw you again." "And mine has done the same," Alexander said bitterly. "To him, love is treason." For a long moment, they simply held each other, their hearts breaking beneath the weight of their family's hatred. The world was tearing them apart, and though their love was fierce, the pressure was crushing. "Maybe," she choked on the words, "maybe this is impossible? Maybe they'll never let us be?" Alexander lifted her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. His eyes burned with a fire that refused to be extinguished. "No," he said firmly. "They can try to destroy us. They can curse our names, strip us of everything we've ever known, but they cannot take this from us. I would rather lose the world than lose you." She broke then, sobbing against his chest, torn between love and despair. And as they held each other in the shadows of the city, one truth became clear. The time for secrecy was ending. The time of choice had come.
The night air was heavy, as though the city itself sensed the storm brewing. After that final ultimatum from their families, Isabella and Alexander knew there was no going back. The secret had been torn into the light, and with it, the fragile world they had built together. They had two choices now: surrender to their bloodlines or fight for love. And so they chose. At dawn, Isabella stood in the garden of her family's estate, her suitcase at her side, her heart pounding like a drum of war. She had defied her father's commands, defied the weight of generations. The roses around her glistened with morning dew, but her eyes held only one reflection: Alexander. He was waiting by the gate, his figure strong, unwavering. When she reached him, she dropped the suitcase and fell into his arms, the relief of his embrace washing over her like salvation. "We can't stay here," he whispered into her hair. "If we remain, they'll tear us apart piece by piece. We need to go, start over, build something that belongs to us." Her voice shook, but her resolve was firm. "Then let's leave it all behind. The money, the legacy, the rivalry, it means nothing without you." Hand in hand, they left the estates that had caged them. But fate had one final trial to deliver. Word spread quickly. Two heirs had defied their dynasties. Two lovers had betrayed the bloodlines. And as Isabella and Alexander made their way through the city, their families confronted them, not with quiet whispers this time, but with public fury. At the steps of the courthouse, where reporters swarmed and cameras flashed, Richard Monterey and Jonathan Davenport stood shoulder to shoulder, united not by peace, but by wrath. "Isabella," her father thundered, "step away from him now, or you are no longer my daughter." "Alexander," his father echoed, "choose your family or ruin." The crowd hushed, holding its breath. And then Alexander took Isabella's hand, lifting it high for all to see. His voice rang out, strong and unshaken. "I choose her. I choose love. If that means losing everything else, so be it." Gasps rippled through the onlookers. Isabella, her heart blazing with courage, turned to her father. "You always told me the family name was everything, but I say love is greater than any empire. And if you can't accept that, then perhaps I was never yours to begin with." The world seemed to tilt in that moment. The reporter surged forward, snapping photos, capturing history as it unfolded. The Montereys and the Davenports, families who had spent decades at war, were powerless to stop it. For what weapon could rival the truth of love declared openly, fearlessly, before the world? In the silence that followed, Isabella and Alexander turned from their families and walked down the courthouse steps together,
their fingers intertwined, their hearts unbreakable. The future was uncertain, but in that uncertainty lay freedom. The freedom to build a life not bound by rivalries or legacies, but by the only bond that mattered: love. And as they disappeared into the city streets, the murmurs of the crowd swelled not with scorn, but with awe. For once upon a time, there had been two names locked in endless hatred. But now there was a new story. The story of Isabella and Alexander, two souls who chose each other, no matter the cost. And in that choice, they found forever. This was not just a love story. It was defiance. It was destiny. It was forever. Thank you for stopping by. Kindly like this video and subscribe to our channel for more interesting stories.